Namaste, Hari Om, and welcome. I am Mathura. I've had a few days off from live shares, but welcome to new guests, old friends who are tuning in to see my live share. I do some Om chants, some prayers to my teachers, my lineage, some chants, a song. And then I've got my long epic talk that I'm going to carry on with. And yes, and today is, for me, is a kind of historical day in my timeline. It's on this day, May the 3rd, in 1974, I received this name, Mathura. And so it's a very special day for me in my calendar. Very, very honored to share it with you. Hope everybody is okay. I know I'm competing tonight with David Icke and some other people, but who knows? Anybody who misses anything can always kind of tap in and go to my new page, Between Worlds. Okay. Hari Om, I'm now going to start. Please chant the Cosmic Om with me or at home, and I will proceed. Om Agyanatimirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakam Vidamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Go Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Go Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Go Bhakta Vrinda Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paskachadi Satanine. Hari Om. Jai Madan Ji. I wish Madan was here today to sing for you. He will soon. He'll be online and you'll be able to hear Madan's beautiful singing and his knowledge of Bhagavad and Gita. I'm really looking forward to that. So I'm trying a slightly different new setup today. I'm going to see if the sound changes. I've done a few things in the room and with the microphone placement. Let's see if it changes things. I'm going to offer a few little prayers to Ganesh and Shiva and to Krishna Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and some songs to Govinda Krishna and some Mahamantra. And Kirtan is normally question and response, but I'm having to do the question and response, but I enjoy it anyway, even if it isn't slightly exhausting. Oh, sorry, change the key. Ganesha Sharanam Sharanam Ganesha 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 Om Namah Shivaya Shivaya Namah Om Namah Shivaya Shivaya Namah Om Namah Shivaya, Shivaya Namo. 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 Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya, 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 Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya. Jai Jai Deva Hari. Jai Jai Deva Hari. Jai Prabhu Dina Dayala Hari. Jaya Prabhu Dina Dayala Hari. Govinda Hari, Gopala 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 Hari. Jai Jai Deva Hari. Jai Jai Deva Hari. Jaya Jaya Deva Hari. Jaya Jaya Deva Hari. Vande Krishna Nanda Kumara. Vande Krishna Nanda Kumara Madana Gopala Mohana Rupa Madana Gopala Mohana Rupa Mohana Rupa Nanda Kumara Mohana Rupa Nanda Kumara Jai Jaya Deva Hari Jai Jaya Deva Hari Jaya Jaya Deva Hari Jaya Jaya Deva Hari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Jaya Deva Hari Jai Jaya Deva Hari Jaya Jaya Deva Hari Jaya Jaya Deva Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giri Baradhari Jaya Giri Baradhari Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jashoda Raja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radhamadhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Bolo Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki Jai Radharani Maharani ki Jai Vrindavana Dama ki Jai Haribo Haribo Haribo. So I'm going to do a song before I start talking. I'm not quite sure what song I'm going to do. Thanks everybody who's popped their heads in. Madan, Madhava, Gwen, and hopefully there's some other people. There must be people tuning into the David Icke thing that's going on. I don't know if it's still on, but it's meant to be massive tonight. Okay. I'm going to do Jar Love because I just feel like doing it. Wrote the song with prana. First song ever wrote. As you'll probably know, Jar's the name of God. Jar Love, rain down on me, join in. The moon shines brightly tonight, and the stars in the heavens immersed in light. We are connected to all. I dance to the rhythm of life, and I feel your love within my soul. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Your love, rain down on me. Your love, rain down on me. Sisters and brothers, please hear my song. Man have but a short time to live. Don't want to get it wrong. Reality is not what it seems, what it appears to be. Beyond the veil of illusion lies real identity. Oh, drink deep from the chalice of wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of your love. Drink deep from the chalice of wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of your love. Your love. With the final curtain, You'll come and take your bow. Leave the magic theater, the one you're in right now. Life come round full circle. You can come back again. Go through the same old story till you don't know when. Jah love, but when you're feeling Jah love, you feel your heart and soul. You no come back here no more. 'Cause Jah Jah take you home. Jah love, rain down on me. Jah love, rain down on me. Drink deep from the chalice of wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of Jah love. Drink deep from the chalice of wisdom. Eat hearty the fruits of Jah love. Jah love, Jah love. Ooh. Sisters and brothers, each one a star. Take hold of your courage, embrace your power. The prophets have spoken, the system will fall. Awaken your children, we herald the dawn. Jah love, rain down on me. Jah love, rain down on me. The moon shines brightly tonight, and the stars in the heavens immersed in light. We are connected to all. We are connected to all. We are connected, 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 connected to all, to all, to all, to all, to all. Jah love. May his love rain down on all of us. Hari Om, Hari Bol. Lovely to share some chants and songs. Keeps me off the streets, keeps me occupied, and well, I don't know who's out there listening at the moment. There's a couple of friends poke their heads in. I'm not sure if they're still there, but anyway, hi everybody, all my lovely friends and people who are tuning in, watching this now and in the future. So, in my long epic story that I've been going over for quite a while now, that's now available, all of the series, if you go onto my new page, Between Worlds, you can go there, and I've uploaded everything there, and they're numbered, and there's a list of topics that I've talked on each one, and where, just like now, I've just started to talk on each video, there's a mark which tells you which minute the story starts on each share. So if you want to just follow the story, you can tune in. It's quite easy now, and please share them on to other people who you think might find the story interesting, because the story is a personal story of my own, It's about how I got the name Mathura, which is the celebration of today. I'm going to just about to tell you on the day when I officially got the name Mathura in 1974. But the story is about historical processes that converged over hundreds of years to create the sociological conditions whereabouts somebody like me from southwest London in the 70s could get involved in this Eastern tradition and go on a long journey with it, which has affected my whole life. I'm now 63 and I started this journey this specific journey involved with the Krishna story just before my 17th birthday. And so there's a lot of things that I have mentioned that have brought me to this point, and lots of considerations. There's a whole bunch of stories with my school, disenchantment with sports, the whole scene that I was involved with, and not just me. This story is not just my story is encapsulated in a big sociological historical processes. So while telling the story, I'm trying to bring light to the things that were going on around me. So there's this story that I've taken, this journey that I have taken, is part of a journey that kind of a subsect of the whole baby boom generation took. Many of them, a majority of them, started their search when they were in their teens or 20s with psychedelics, and then started looking for deeper spiritual or kind of more permanent ways of tapping into spirituality. And many got involved with Eastern religions, various teachers, various traditions. I specifically got involved with the story of Krishna and the Hare Krishna movement that was brought to the West in 1965 by Bhaktivedanta Swami, sometimes known as Srila Prabhupada. Now, when he came, it went through this transformation, which I've explained. I'm kind of not going off into too many details because everything has been written before. I'm just trying to put it into a package and bring it in line with my personal story. It's to try and give people a bigger idea of what it was like for somebody like me to go through this story, join the Krishna movement at the age and the time and the location, which I did was I moved into the Christian temple on the 12th of October 1973, just weeks before my 17th birthday in Amsterdam. So I've left London, I'm in Amsterdam. And when I joined the center in Amsterdam, at that time, it was just a converted garage in the red light district of Amsterdam. And the whole process of the Krishna movement in Europe had gone through a process before me coming there in October 23. So it had its story and the players in the game involved in that story. And at the time that I arrived there were certain characters involved. And so many of us collectively, we all went through this story together. And the bigger story is not just we were going through this journey in Amsterdam. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness had started to expand, and it was expanding, well, quite rapidly compared with the earlier days. It started in 66 in New York, then went to Montreal, San Francisco, then came to London, went to Australia, Germany, then it's gone to North Europe, and it's starting to permeate, and more people are beginning to join the Krishna movement. And many of the things that affected the volume and expansion of the Krishna movement, there was quite a few things involved, but one of them was also having the facility for more and more people to stay and live communally and be involved with the organization. So we've moved in Amsterdam in around February 74 from this small converted garage in the Bataviastraat near the red light district to this really quite impressive building, 18th century, maybe, yes, at least 18th century, on the Gracht, in the Herengracht, the Canal of the Gentlemen's. And I've explained that the Grachts in Amsterdam, they kind of go around in a horseshoe. They come on one side and go around the town and go around in circles. And so you got to the Herengracht. If you were coming from Central Station and you came going towards the center of the dam, you would take a right, and then you'd go over a few of these little bridges that you see in the lovely picturesque town of Amsterdam. And you would come over one of these bridges turn a little bit to the left, and there would be number 96, the Herengracht. And it was very big. You had a basement, a ground floor with a big back garden, and another house at the back of the property. And then you went up these stairs. So downstairs, there were these big foyer. There was 2 big offices and 1 big back room. And then you went up these stairs. There was a big room there at the end of the stairs. That's where we had eventually the kitchen. There was a bathroom there. You went up this other little section of stairs. And then there was that became the temple room, which was basically on the 1st floor, major. Then you went up some more stairs. That big room became the prasadam room. Then you went up more stairs. And then there was, on one side of the building, there was a room that was going to be used by the ladies. And then up the next was the brahmachari ashram, which is where the single males were going to stay. And there was a big room, a couple of little small rooms. And then he went up even to another top floor. And there was these areas that later became the bathroom. And then there was another room that I moved in a few years later. So just to give you an idea, and the actual orientation of the building, the front was facing the east and the back was facing the west. And the canals, we were facing the canal, so the canal in front of us was going north-south. That was the location of where we were, the setting now. And as I've described, there was a lot of work to be done on turning this building into a temple, a center. And the actual temple, the altar that we had at that time, was transferred from Amsterdam to Amsterdam, from the Bataillonstraat to the Herengracht, and it was up in the top, this 1st floor, and gradually different devotees, I've explained that a lot of them was Jatismara, Anton and Hare, and maybe a couple of others, and Nanibunda. They were all talented, and they were working on the temple room. And I was helping at the beginning, but then, as I explained in my last share, to get all of this to happen needed money, basically. And I was in this process of maturing and growing up from being just a schoolboy to suddenly joining a community where most of the people were older than me. Even if they were only a couple, most of them, like people like Mrigapati, was 10 years older. Tulsi Das was maybe 12, 13 years older, and most of the other devotees were in their late 20s or middle 20s, and I was still just 17. Ranadurmada was just 18, and like that. And so as we opened this center, just the fact that we had this center, it was a big space. We were doing our programs, and I joined this. What happened was I was cajoled into joining a traveling party. Now, the traveling parties would go with vans that were specially built with lots of books underneath, and a place with kind of wood on top and some kind of slightly softer padding, and where we could sometimes just plain wood. And that's where, if we couldn't get somewhere to stay while we were traveling, we would sleep in the vans. So they were designed for sleeping and for storing. And there was 2 generally at that time. Later there was going to expand. And in each party there was about 4 men. So, or young men. We were very young, and it was there was a kind of prestige attached to the a bit like now. The frontliners, the NHS and the people on the front line, they're all everyone's very grateful for them because they're going out there and making everyone else's lives possible. So in a sense, what happened was, because the people who were going out and selling literature, which is what we did when we went traveling at that time, those funds would go to help pay the bills, the rent, the food, and all of the worship and the puja. It's quite a costly affair trying to manage managing an ashram in a community. And because none of the devotees were taking salaries at all at this time, there was also Hare Krishna Das and Mukta Sangha. Hare Krishna was managing the Spiritual Sky Incense Company, and that was bringing in some money as well. But so I got cajoled because it was very cold, and some of the leaders of the traveling parties got ill, and so they asked me if I could just do it for a week just to help out. And I thought I didn't really want to do it because, as I have also mentioned, I did have certain kind of, it was part of the Krishna movement that I have had issues, and I suppose in one sense always have. It was the and a lot of the negative opinions from public around the world about the Hare Krishna movement come from this encounter. It could be, it's not always a negative encounter, but there could be negative encounters with quite kind of pushy Krishna devotees approaching people all around the world. And it was just starting in America, where they were going to airports. And there's lots of parodies of Hare Krishna devotees, and even in Hollywood movies of devotees at airports and places, kind of like hassling people and hitting them up. And I'm going to describe my personal story, but explain the bigger picture of that, because it's quite complex, and it set a precedent. And as I've mentioned before, the Christian movement started in America and was a bit more advanced in terms of its development and the amount of people that had joined in America, and the kind of missives and the managerial kind of way of doing things, excuse me, was coming from America. And there were very famous devotees who were well known in the Krishna movement, who were actually kind of like making cassettes to other devotees in America and the West of the world about how to kind of do not very nice things with money, and kind of being slightly dishonest in the way that you would cajole people and get people to give money and get enough money out of them. It's a very controversial story. Not everybody believes, has the same opinion about all of these things. And this is a point I should make at this moment, that my story that I'm explaining is a story about my journey and seen through my eyes. And obviously I'm going to be giving my commentary and opinion about things, but I will also be talking about other devotees' ideas and opinions, at least how they appeared to me. And it's true in history about all sorts of things, that many different people can go through similar journeys at different times in situations, and when they recall their experience, either at the time or later, they may have quite differing things to say about their experiences for various reasons, because there's lots of people involved in the story, human interconnections, and not everybody in those dynamics will have the same relationships with everybody else. So they may have very negative experiences where someone else might have a positive experience. So that isn't always a good thing to take into consideration when reading historical accounts, and also with mine. So I've tried to explain as much about me and my story so that you can kind of gauge the type of perception that I have, to make it as clear as possible, so you can go, okay, that's interesting. That's how Mathura saw it. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because what I'm speaking and all my earlier history I've written as a manuscript mostly, and I got in contact with an old school friend who I hadn't seen for years, through Facebook, and I sent in the manuscript, and my description of how our experience at school was so different. He thought it was interesting, but he had a very different experience. And and from my experience, I went and became a Hare Krishna, and he became an executive at BP, British Petroleum. So it just shows you the kind of different directions you can go from being together at one time in life and in a situation, and then having totally different stories due to your personalities and the destiny that you have in your life. So there you are. There I am. That's trying to give a little bit of an overview about the situation and where I am in the story and all the different things I'm facing and the complexities. And as I go along, I will be explaining my story and reflecting what the ramifications and the bigger picture of what's going on, because now I'm part of this international society, even though I'm based in Amsterdam. But the Hare Krishna movement is kind of has a hierarchy, how it's run, And Prabhupada created what was the GBC in 1970 as the Iskcon expanded, because there was many centers. And the GBCs, there was 11. They were just meant to look after certain centers in their areas. In Europe, we had North Europe and we had Southern Europe. And the demographics were going to change quite shortly. At that time, and then around after each temple had a temple president, and then they maybe have had and then some the people that actually kind of made things work on the ground were called the temple commanders. And then you had different stratospheres, like now on those traveling parties. They were leaders of the traveling vans, who was called traveling Sankirtan, basically. That was the name that was given, even though we weren't specifically doing chanting, the congregation of the chanting of the holy names. It was considered Sankirtan because the books that we were giving were from a press. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had said that the printing press was like a big drum, because you could the drum you could only hear just a few blocks away, but the literature and the sound vibration of literature can go on and on and on and on. So he called it the Brihat Mridanga, the printing press. And the traveling parties that distributed the books, we were called traveling Sankirtan parties. So when I refer in the future, I don't have to keep explaining this term. We were on the traveling Sankirtan parties. That's how they were called in Iskcon in those days. And so on my first day out, what we used to do is we would be 4 of us. We would load up these vans with these books, and we would go off. There would be a driver, had to be a driver, and there was generally 3 others of us, or 4 of us, maybe 5. And there was Holland and Belgium. The areas that we had to go and distribute our literature were in those, it's called Benelux, Holland and Belgium. A lot of that was to do with the fact that the language, even though it's the Nederlands is the language, it's in Belgium it's called Flemish. It's basically North Belgium anyway. It's spoken differently, but the language is the same, and they stay. Even North Holland historically became Protestant, and Belgium predominantly became Belgium, and then Catholic. Sorry, excuse me, and the it was divided into the north part of Belgium speaking Flemish and the south part being French. So there you go. There was hardly any literatures in Dutch. It was all in English. Some books were being translated. We had maybe a tiny little magazine that had been translated that time by Jagadev, who was the brother of Hare Krishna Das and Surabhi, who I'd mentioned earlier. So we went off, I think the first day we went off from Amsterdam. We went to Utrecht, or no, it was Den Haag. That was it. We went to Den Haag. Den Haag's not that far from Holland. I mean, Holland's not a massive country, and so it didn't take that long to get to anywhere. And so what we would do is we would go off in our van. We would leave from Amsterdam. It was we'd have the Sunday feast and everything, the week with the devotees, and then on the Monday, generally what we'd do is we'd leave on the Monday and go somewhere and start. And generally we would stay a lot of the time in youth clubs. That was one of the places where we used to. I mean, not youth clubs. Youth hostels, youth hostels. We would stay in youth hostels, but a lot of the time, and in the summer, we would often camp. But youth hostels was generally quite good, and they were quite lovely in Holland and Belgium. The youth hostels, they were quite north in Holland. They were much more modern, and we would go with our van, and we would they would have a kitchen sometimes that we could use, and sometimes we would have facilities in our vans for cooking. At that early time when I went out, we didn't really do that much cooking at that time, as far as I can remember. But what we did have was Tulsi Das, who was the in charge, had kind of trained the parties and organized them and given quite a lot of impetus when he had joined at the beginning of 73 in the early spring in Amsterdam. And he had kind of really organized it very, very well. And he really wanted all he knew that the pillar, the backbone really of the whole kind of center depended a lot on the traveling Sankirtan boys to bring in the money and to keep the literature going, which was the kind of one of the main reasons for the Krishna movement was to distribute Krishna consciousness, and that was in the form of chanting of the holy names and the literatures and the books that Srila Prabhupada had translated or written. The main text, these were all going to get translated over time. Bhagavad Gita was already there in English, and Srimad Bhagavatam in English, and then there were the smaller books, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Nectar of Devotion, and then there were the small books like Easy Journey to Other Planets, Science of Self-Realization. These are the ones all in English, and the Sri Ishopanishad, and these were the kind of I think the smaller books were the first ones to get translated into foreign languages, because as the devotees joined the temple and they went on these distributing, they needed something to give out, and big books were quite difficult to convince people to give a donation for. So it was magazines and smaller literatures. And so we went to Den Haag, and I don't think we actually just went to the town. We were dropped off, and because I was in Holland, and I had since I've been living there for a few months. This was around March, middle March, and it was still really, really cold. Or it was coming. Or maybe it was April, even around this time, mid-March to April, because we'd moved in February, and it was getting cold. We went to Den Haag, and I had to write what we were meant to say on a bit of paper. And my compatriot, devotee friend, was on the same group as us. That was Ranadurmada, and there was just a year or so separating us in age. And he'd actually joined the center just 2 weeks later than me, but he spoke Dutch and French. And he helped me write this bit of paper about the things of what you're meant to say. I was very nervous about it, and I wasn't looking forward to it, but I did it anyway. I'll explain to you. I've got a few points written down about the kind of the ideas and why I ended up doing it for quite a while after this. But I had a lot of issues about going on the streets and talking to people, but there was these very unusual words. Actually, I don't think I actually wrote it down straight away. I thought I'd just try it. But then after a while, Rana Durmada, who was called Rulof at this moment, he was on another street. And I'd have to keep going to him and saying, what's that word you have to say? I keep saying it wrong. And the word that you had to learn, first of all, was Osterblief. It is an unusual word for an English-speaking people, Osterblief. Name it may. It was like, excuse me, please take this. That's really, they told me that's all you had to really kind of like learn. And then you would kind of like, then you would say, spreekt u Engels? Do you speak English? And hopefully they did. If they didn't, which was very rare, you would then have to say, if you couldn't say anything to them in Dutch, you would say, geef kleine bijdrage. That's my version of Dutch. Please give a little donation. And they'll go, veel? How much? And you would tell them, geef wat je wilt, give what you can. And if they gave like nothing, you say, oh, can you give a little bit more? That was the kind of all I'd learned at that time. And one of the things that you go through with this kind of activity, that you learn how to kind of don't let it bring you down after a while, is because if you have to do this for quite a lot over a period of time, you have to get used to being rejection. It's not much fun doing something in life where you're doing something, trying to be, and people go, no. They're rejecting you. They don't want you. They don't want what you've got to give. It's not very enthusing. But then on the other hand, if suddenly you do meet somebody who smiles and they go, hello, what have you got? That's very nice. Oh, that looks very interesting. And you have a lovely little talk and they like to give a donation and they go off. You start feeling really, really good. That's how I reacted to it. And a lot of devotees who went out on book distribution, they had that experience. Some people just couldn't stand the rejection and just said, that's not for me. I can't do this service. I want to go back to the temple and do some other service. I can't deal with this kind of rejection. And that's how you kind of like filtered out the people that were going to be constant on this surface, because if they got good results, that means they were good at what they were doing and they got more confident. And people who just weren't very good and became miserable or depressed by it, they would normally just kind of revert and go back to the temple and temple life and get involved with all the different services that needed to be done there, especially with a new temple like Herengracht that was big. You see, back at home, and I've also explained earlier that when you join the Krishna temple, the organization, I use this term, it's like stepping into a hypnotic bubble. You literally go into this world and the whole kind of world disappears, and there's this Hare Krishna world that you've just entered in, and it's totally absorbing. You're not watching television, you're not being distracted by reading magazines and newspaper articles. Your whole life becomes focused. And for me, I was doing it voluntarily. That's why I wanted to do. In fact, that's quite a big thing about what was happening to me. Was I was only just, August became 17 after I arrived in the temple, a few months earlier. And up until then, my whole life had been dictated really about not everything, because I had made choices about sports, but schools and education and the format that you're born into as a child, and the fact that your parents have control over you and society, that you should do this at this time. Now I was actually I was in a situation that I'd actually made my own choices about. I know quite a few second and third generation, especially second generation Krishna devotees, who have a very different story, very, very different story. They didn't choose to become Hare Krishnas, their parents did, and then they were born into it. And so their whole journey through this whole story and the time when they came is very different, because I was doing this voluntarily, which makes quite a lot of difference. But this service that we were doing on the streets, I wasn't really doing it voluntarily. I had always, like I said, I'd always had slight issues about it, and now it was suddenly getting into the situation where I was having to do it. So there I was on the street, a walking street. They had lots of these in Holland. They hadn't really caught on too much in England yet, but Holland was a bit more advanced in designing their cities in a modern way. I had lots of walking precincts everywhere. So that's where we went. We were told that's where we go, and you do this street here, and that's what you actually had to do. And then there was a time earmarked for meeting up in the evening, finishing generally after the afternoon, after people had come back from the offices. And I think we may have even had some snacks with us, but generally we would have a breakfast and then an evening meal, and maybe if we were hungry we'd get something like an apple. Or we were very pure. You hadn't taken anything or eaten anything for months and months that hadn't been offered to Krishna, that had been sanctified. I hadn't gone out and just eaten something. That was a kind of unusual experience. I hadn't been involved in that. So on that first day, I was going up to it, but I couldn't say the Osterblief. It started coming out. I forgot even what it was. It would go blister off, Blusterblief. And I had to keep going, what is it, Random? And he go, Osterblief. And I go, okay, Osterblief, name it, me. And I kind of got it by the end of the day, the very basic thing. Now, what was interesting was, while I was on the street that day, and this is what kind of made my day, after maybe selling a couple of books and having a couple of lucky encounters with nice, friendly people, but lots of rejections, I saw this dude walking down with hair and a jacket, suede jacket, and he looked really interesting. And I said, "Hey, Hare Krishna," and he said, "Hare Krishna." And I had a Bhagavad Gita in my hand, and I started talking to him. He started talking to me, and I showed him the book Bhagavad Gita, and he said, "I have one of those at home. I have that. It's a really good book, really, really, really nice." I said, "Great." And I said, "What are you doing?" He was American, and he says, "I'm over here. I'm working on a film." And I said, "Wow. You know what? You do look a little familiar, I'm sure I've seen you in something." And he said, "Yeah, most probably," kind of. And I said, "Well, anyway, look, nice to meet you." And I kind of, and as I kind of said, "What was it in?" And he looked around and he said, "You may have seen me in Easy Rider." And I kind of went, "Right, Easy Rider. he didn't look like, Peter Fonda. Who's that other guy? And I couldn't remember his name. But anyway, later on, when we all met up and we went back to, and it was like, oh, how did it go? How much did you collect? What did you do? And then we were driving to the youth hostel. I said to Tirtha Sadhaka, I said, I just met this Jap. He was in that Easy Rider. Who were the guys in it? And he said, oh, it was Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper. And I went, that's the guy. I just met him. And so that made my day, really, on my first day. So it was kind of sour but sweet, And I think much of the experience of when I was going to go on with this story was a bit of a mixture like that. It was very intimate being with 4 people after being in the big community. We all kind of brought us as a little group closer together. It reminded me of my kind of going, as my gangs when I was a schoolboy. We had gangs of 3 or 4 of us, and we all got on very, very, very well. There was no problems, and we were very strict. We went back. I think we had some snacks. I think we may have even bought some prasadam from the temple because we'd just come and we opened that out, ate that, had some hot milk, and somebody read Krishna book. I don't think we did any kirtan in the evening. Maybe we sat down and we did some little quiet kirtan because we just had cartels very softly. We would chant together, and then the morning, we were so strict. This bubble, hypnotic bubble, even though we weren't in the temple, we were still in it, and it involved just following these very strictly. All the edicts of the Krishna movement was, the positive things where we'd already kind of not doing this and not doing that. We'd made that vow, but it was like, what were we doing? Apart from going on the streets, we would get up at 4, take our cold showers, do a little Mangal Artik, which involved a whole series of prayers that I was familiar with now. And if you didn't, you had a book. We had these lovely prayers called the Shikshastika that became everything that every devotee kind of recites in the morning. They were written by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, a guru in the Vaishnava lineage from nearly 300 years before. And it was the prayers to the spiritual master. And there was a very nice morning melody that's very popular in Bengal. If you hear some folk singers like Amar Pal and stuff, they sing lots of bhajans in this kind of, it's called Prabhati. It's this time of the morning. Do, 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 do. That was the melody, and it was Sangsara Davana Lida Loka Pranaya Karyanya Gana Ganatvam Paptasya Karyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Sri Charanana Vindam. And then it'll go to Hare Krishna, Hare. And I love that tune. And it's the beautiful way to start the day with one's mind absorbed in the sound vibrations of God into that melody, greet the day, and then go into one's japa. And we were all chanting these 16 rounds, 108 beads, each bead, the whole Hare Krishna Maha Mantra on each bead, and we were doing that. And then we would have a little class in the morning, just like in the temple. We had the Srimad Bhagavatam. Tirtha Sadhaka was our leader. He knew, was senior to us. He would open the book. We would have the book. We would pass it around. There was the transliteration. We would, read it together. Just take for exist, the first verse of the Bhagavatam, it starts off with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Then it has this first line, which is the same as the first line of Vedanta Sutra, Janmadya Asya Yata. And then it would, then there would be the next verses, and we would recite those, go through the verses, and then we would have breakfast, and we would have lots of very, we were well fed. If we weren't having cooked breakfast, we had cereals, we had bread, we had crisp breads, we had peanut butter, we had honey, and fruits, and we ate well. Let's put it that way. We ate really well. Krishna devotees are famous for kind of eating tasty food anyway. Some people don't believe it's always the healthy mixture, but we were enjoying it at that time. So after a few days of doing this routine, and doing it every day, there was different stories. I think we went to Den Haag, and then we went to Utrecht, not far from Amsterdam, and at the end of the week we came back to Amsterdam on the Saturday. Now I remember this because it was my first. I've been for months, since October, in the temple every day doing the routine, and it had become my kind of my soul, my life, my reference point, and become very attached to singing in the temple in front of the deities of Jagannath. And we came back to the temple in the early evening, and but they'd had the evening arati. I remember they'd had the evening arati. And when we arrived in the door, there was this kind of reception, so enthusiastic for all of us. And they used to take the maha plates, the special offerings of all the special preparations that had been offered, and save them so that when we would come back, we would be just spoilt, rotten. But I just came in, and just as we came in and we were like, hello, Haribo, I could hear this incredible chanting coming from upstairs that I couldn't recognize that wasn't a Westerner, and I just, who's that? They said, oh, that's Ram Prasad. Go up and see. I said, Ram Prasad, who's Ram Prasad? And so I rushed up the stairs, went into the temple room, and there was apart from the pujari doing something, there was this Indian gentleman looking very pucker, and a lovely kurta with a shawl, lovely white dhoti, and he had a mridanga, and he was singing Jagannatha Swami, Nayana Patagami, Bhavantu me, oh dear Lord Jagannath. But the way he was singing, I'd never heard it sing. And I went in there, and I remember I just stood there, and he looked at me, and I offered my obeisances, and I was just standing there. And he started to increase his singing, and the deities of Jagannath were just, and Baladev and Subhadra, the whole altar was just throbbing, pulsating with energy and intensity. And and he started Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavantu me. And then he went into this higher bit, and like nobody else ever sung like that. And I just kind of, I was almost crying with emotion. It was fantastic. And I waited till he had finished, and then I offered my respects, and he did, and he introduced himself. We embraced, and then I found out more about him later, and we went down and took prasadam together. It was wonderful. And so this gentleman, this Ram Prasad, he was Ram Prasada's Adhikari, and he was a disciple of Madhav Maharaj, who was a godbrother of Prabhupada in India. And I can't remember. I think he's definitely a Bengali. And my friend Jatismara, who just joined at the same time as me, he had been in the temple and been associating with him that week since he had arrived, and he kind of again introduced me and told me all the wonderful things that Ram Prasad had been showing him. Ram Prasad was a married man, a businessman who had met Prabhupada in India, and asked if he was going to Europe, but he didn't want to live. He was very pure. He wanted to live with devotees and take prasadam, and Prabhupada had given him permission. And I think he was traveling for a couple of months. He was in Holland and in Sweden. I have no idea what his business was, but he was a wonderful person, gave a lovely color to the temple. And there was this one little section of the brahmachari ashram, a separate room, and they'd given him a special space there. And he actually went out with us on the Nagar Kirtan on the street, and he had these beautiful kind of pointed black shoes that looked very elegant. He himself looked very elegant, and he had a beautiful way of dancing and chanting. And he showed us all these photographs from India. And, we'd heard about the Gaudiya Math, but we didn't really know what it was. We knew that it was the kind of the organization that the Krishna movement in the West had kind of stemmed from, and that there was different sections, but we didn't know that much at this time, what it was. And he showed us all these photographs from India of these processions of hundreds and hundreds of Bengalis and Indian devotees with beautiful flags and signs and big symbols. And it was very interesting, and it kind of gave a lot of validation for what we were doing as foreigners, that this wasn't just some kind of thing that's just made up, and it's a tradition that's going on in India, and we just happen to be the Western branch of it. It was like that. And so that was a very nice that was very nice for me. I really enjoyed that. And it also, I was very attracted to the indigenous roots of the Krishna movement, really. Most of what I've been exposed to up until then, even the songs, apart from Prabhupada's chanting, all the chants and the kirtans, because there were devotees especially in America, and there was lots of cassettes had been recorded. There was a studio in Los Angeles called the Golden Avatar Studio by Krishna Kanti, and they had they'd made recordings. Different recordings had been made there, and we would listen to all of these, and they were great. Some of them were really, really good. I especially like the kirtans of Badaraj. They were really, really good. And then gradually we heard the tapes of this very special devotee that was most probably one of the most fascinating Krishna devotees of that time, called Vishnu Jan Swami. Really, really interesting. My godbrother Vyasaki Das has written a couple of books, one still to be written, called Radha Damodar Vilas, about his life and what happened at that time. Very, very well researched, and that gives you an insight into the early days of the Krishna movement in America and a bit in India, and into the nature of Vishnu Jan, and then this other very, very interesting devotee, a special devotee called Jayananda, who was in San Francisco, and that Prabhupada adored, basically. I mean, Prabhupada loved all of his disciples, and he loved Vishnu Jan as well. But these are kind of devotees that Prabhupada kind of like pointed out, Jayananda as being kind of totally pure. There's all different kinds of people joining the Krishna movement with all sorts of different stories, motivations, and also whatever the story was that they had before they joined the Krishna movement, when they joined it, as it was growing, they morphed in many various ways according to the influences and who they were and the story that they were going through. Interestingly, in that way, in this story that I'm going to tell, there's certain individuals that I'm going to have to mention, and please forgive me, all those people that I may mention in slightly derogatory ways or critical, because many of them have changed. They have maybe apologized for things that they've done or not. But the story I'm going to tell is there's some examples of how the power of group dynamics and the nature of hierarchies and the system of how Iskcon wasn't actually proved to be that healthy for many of the individuals involved. Especially if you were kind of slightly upwardly mobiled and you didn't like people telling you what to do. It generally meant that you wanted the position and be in the position because you were opinionated and you wanted to tell other people what to do. And now, apparently, before I joined, Hare Krishna Das, I just spoke to him on the phone 2 days ago, and he told me something I actually didn't know. But there was when Prabhupada came to Amsterdam, in 1972 and installed Jagannath, there was a devotee there who was the temple president called Akshayananda, who had been a guitar player in New Zealand, quite big, and he joined the Krishna temple, and he was fine, it was nice. And then he took sannyas, which is this order of renunciation that's higher than the brahmachari, and it's actually, this is an example because Prabhupada, it's one of the true regrets that he actually publicly writes about prematurely giving this order of sannyas to people that weren't really ready for it, because the key part of it was that you're saying no to sex life and interactions with females very strongly. And because of the hierarchy, Swami, it gave you the role of being a Swami. Now, Akshayananda, apparently, according to Hare Krishna, his whole personality changed. He would sit in the office expecting everybody to do everything, and then he would make edicts and make things that were just kind of completely illogical. And it got to the point where about 10 of the devotees from the Amsterdam temple left and went to Heidelberg, temple in Germany, and complained and kind of, about Akshayananda. And actually he was removed from his post, and Hare Krishna's brother Jagadev got the post for a while, and then after that Tulsi Das came in. But I didn't know about that because a bit down the line in the story, I don't think I'm going to get to that part in the story quite yet. It's coming soon. In fact, I most probably will deal with it tomorrow. It's an example of the story is very complex being part of this organization. There's if people come ask me this question, what was it like? Expecting me to give some simplistic answer. It's actually, talk about shades and shades and shades and complexities. There's lots and lots of brilliant, great things. Some of the stuff I've just been describing to you, the kind of camaraderie, the spiritual focus, but there was also some certain things that, like, hustling people on the streets, possibly using techniques to kind of not dupe people, but to get as much money as you can out of them. And then there was all these kind of personality traits that were going to come into the story that were going to bring clashes amongst certain devotees, even in these early days. So community life and the communal social experiment that we were all taking part in, to be part of this organization that Prabhupada had set up, and following the great mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from 500 years ago in Bengal, and being part of the Sankirtan movement and spreading the divine name all over the world. This was going to have its complications as well involved with it to this day. And what I've also mentioned before, there's a kind of we have our individual shadow contents that we have bringing, and then collectively we will have, there's a collective shadow that starts to build up as certain things get involved with the organization, such as the negative connotations of authority figures, centralization of things, and things deviating from the vision that Prabhupada hoped that the organization that he'd set up would go. But this is part of the story, that as we go along, and as the matrix of the whole Krishna movement became more and more complex, for a moment, just kind of, if you just do a kind of Google Earth and look down at the Earth at this time, right, 73, and look at all the different towns around the world that have become, there have been Krishna centers. Each one of them have gone through their story with different individuals with their stories, and some of them been trained well, some of them had not been so trained well, some of them were more clever, intelligent, more able at people friendly, dealing with other people. They understood the philosophy better. So it was kind of each little center, and all the people that got involved had their own little stories. And as I said before, nothing is static. It's all in morph, and it's changing. So if you hear devotees, oh, I was at that temple, I remember you when you were there for that time, and then you went off over there, and then you were there. And so people got to meet different people, and the group dynamics was constantly shifting all over the place. And they had good aspects to it, and they had shadow aspects to it. And as the story evolves over the years and the matrix gets complex, so the shadow aspects of the Krishna movement also grow and get more and more complex. And it was one of this unusual because everybody was going into unknown territory, and it was a big social experiment. Nobody really knew where it was all going. We were just very inspired by Srila Prabhupada and the teachings, and the kind of like the group energy that was generated. There is a very powerful energy when you get a group of people doing some focused activity, and and it can be working differently for different people who are involved in this process. This sadhana, getting up early, taking cold showers, doing very rigorous sadhana of attending spiritual, from 4 o'clock in the morning till 9 in the morning. That's 5 5 hours of spiritual focused practices just before breakfast, and then all day long as kind of selfless services, doing all sorts of various things going on. And it was a different story for everybody. You know, some people flourished in certain environments, and in other environments they didn't. You know, so just to give you an explanation about. So in one sense, it would seem very simple. There I was with, you know, a few people just traveling, going there, but I was involved in a very complex matrix that was surrounding me and the whole organization that was morphing and morphing and morphing at that time. Okay, so during this period, Tulsi Das went off to India in around March. And they was one of the in 74, and they had a big international festival. They just built this one building in Bengal, the birthplace of Chaitanya, the Iskcon center, and it was a big first international kind of festival there. Most of the temple presidents in around the world went off for a couple of weeks, few weeks there to first Mayapur in Bengal, and then over to Vrindavan. The temple in Vrindavan hadn't quite been built yet. It was going to be built. But in 74, in Mayapur, they had this building, and lots of other construction work was going on. And while there, during that time, Tulsi Das, our temple president, they had a big yagya. This is how people got initiated. And there are two different types of initiations in the Hare Krishna movement that you get. If you've been following all of the procedures and the programs, and they can see the authorities that you're kind of sincere, after 6 months, you were recommended to either the GBC, who recommended you to Prabhupada, or directly that so-and-so is suitable for initiation at the next initiation ceremonies. And they all had to be okayed by Srila Prabhupada. And names were chosen, and during the ceremonies there was all these Tulsi beads that were bought, and Prabhupada would sit and chant some japa on each bead, mala, while the procedure was going on. And the procedure was in India and in Vedic culture, for special kind of ceremonies, including initiations and marriages. There is a yagya, a fire pit, normally made with bricks and then with sand and wood, and then pieces of splinters of wood are put on it, and they're colored sands, and there's all sorts of mantras and procedures that are used to perform these ceremonies. And the fire, Vishnu is said to incarnate as the witness in the fire, as ghee is being poured on, and it's an incredible, and in the end, bananas. And if you're in a kind of a, like we were going to have, okay, this ceremony that I'm describing, this was all being planned to be the first big ceremony that had happened in the Herengracht since it had opened. And four of us had been recommended for initiation, because we'd all done over the 6-month course basically, and we were good devotees. That was me, Mark, Rulof, Jake, and Bishak, this wonderful artist who just from America, from Boston area. And we were all four going to get our first Hari Nam initiation. In the other Gaudiya mats, they don't give that much importance to this initiation. They give more to the next initiation you get down the line, where you're given Gayatri Mantra. But in Iskcon, this was we all considered this first initiation to be very important. During the ceremony, there were Tulsi beads, these Kanti mala. Kanti means neck. They were there sanctified. And that was what we were going to get after the ceremony. We'd have our neck beads, and we would have a name. So the ceremony went on, and as far as I remember, there was so Tulsi Das had gone to India, come back with the beads that had been chanted on by Prabhupada in Mayapur, and then the ceremony was organized. But what had been going on behind the scenes is this, that in Germany, this is where the kind of politics gets involved with the story. This unavoidable. Hansadutta in Germany, who was the GBC in charge, and I've already mentioned earlier that the devotees in Amsterdam had a bit of a problem with Hansadutta, even though we were under it. I hadn't seen Hansadutta in all these months come to Amsterdam. They'd produced some records as a new thing of selling records, and the whole thing is records were very cheap, they found out, to produce, and you could get more money for them, and with that money give out a book. It was a kind of a justification, a way of giving out the holy name, and a way of getting money and giving out more literature. That was the whole story behind it. Now Tulsi Das had joined together with Manibanda, and Manibanda had a very good tape recorder and had done some recordings in India of Achyutananda Swami, and some other recordings had been made in a studio. And what they wanted, they'd had this plan, was that because Hansadutta was doing exactly what Prabhupada didn't want managers to do. In other words, Prabhupada wanted each temple president and each center to be autonomous. He was against centralization. But many leaders in Iskcon, they all got up their heads and they all got involved. As soon as they got positions, they were control freaks and they wanted to control everything. And this caused a lot of continuous dissension all over the Krishna movement. So this problem was happening, and Tulsi Das was, been all there, not as early as Hansadutta in the story, but he was a strong chap and had very good kind of management acumen and credentials. And he was sick of having to kind of kowtow to Hansadutta to buy the records from them. He wanted to do something independent in Amsterdam. So they made this album called India. But I have to admit, on the back of and then on the back, they had all these pictures, and it was kind of designed to kind of get donations because it had pictures of Krishna devotees giving out free food in India, had on the back of it. So while the preparations were going on, Sankirtan, getting ready to get initiated, Tulsi Das had been falling out with Hansadutta. I have to admit, as a young Krishna devotee traveling, I didn't really know. We weren't told all these things, what were going on. But then all of a sudden, Tulsi Das just disappeared. He went to the airport, got on a flight to America, and I think he I think someone said that he left a little note somewhere, and it said Flight Maya and LA or something like that. Now, in between him leaving and the next replacement coming, this is, as far as I can remember, this is when this sacrifice went on, with Atmananda doing it. But shortly to follow that was going to become another personality that was going to come to Amsterdam, and it was going to be very difficult, and it was going to be a big change from what had been going on in this first kind of chapter of my experience with the Krishna movement and getting my name. And now this new story was going to happen, and it's very important to know these stories, because this is the kind of challenges that you can face when you join an organization full of people from all over the world with all sorts of different kinds of motives, and you're involved in an organization that's expanding and has a hierarchy, and it's ripe for kind of abusing by people who are immature. And that's going to be the next part of my story. And so please tune in tomorrow, and I will continue with that part of the story. And I'm not going to explain every little detail of my life, but these are very important things to do with the nature of the organization and my experience of going through it, and not just me, loads and loads of the devotees that were there at that time. So I think I'm going to sing you one song from the Bindu Babas. Again, just to finish off, I think I'm just going to chant I'm going to chant the Bob Marley one I do. So much troubles in the world, and Jai Sri Ram. So much trouble in the world. There is so much trouble in the world. Bless my eyes this morning. The sun is on the rise once again. The way things are going, anything can happen, 'cause they're sailing on merry-go trip. Blah, blast off on the spaceship. Miles from reality. No care for you, no care for me. So much trouble in the world. There is so much trouble in the world. All you've got to do is give a little, give a little, give a little bit one more time, yeah. Yeah. Bolo. Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. 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 Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Shri Ram, Jai 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 Ram, Jai Jai Ram. So much trouble in the world. So much trouble in the world. All you've got to do is give a little, give a little, give a little bit one more time, yeah, yeah, yeah. Shri Ram. Bolo Ramachandra Bhagavan ki jai. Thank you all again for allowing me to share this with you, or for coming to make the effort to kind of tune in, and I hope you enjoyed the story and some of the songs. And it's continuing. It's very complex trying to explain the story. I have written it, and it's the first time that I'm kind of speaking it in this way, going into the details that I am. And for many, this story might not be that interesting, or for many it might be kind of a bit too close to the bone, but I hope you find it interesting and informative, and for future generations who maybe kind of hear this story and hear this, they will actually know what actually happened in those days. And as far as I know, nobody in Belgium and Holland has actually given a kind of personal account of their story and their history. So I'm trying to fill in a historical gap there with my sharings. Okay. Peace and love to you all. And it is a very, very difficult, challenging time. At the moment, it seems like the big thing at the moment is we don't want to be locked down, and other people are going, no, we want to be locked down. And you know, according to your belief system and idea about what you think this virus is, and all the stories connected to it, and as usual, the world's divided on all of these different things. So I personally am just watching it all. I'm watching and observing and seeing what different people are saying, because basically I got I don't really know, and I don't really. Things have been going on my whole life around the world, and I haven't poked my head in them, and it's never really hasn't really helped me. Having getting involved with those different ideas hasn't helped the world, so I don't want to personally allow all of that stuff that's going on in the world to kind of like swamp my consciousness, swamp my mindset, because I feel I've got other better things and more important things to put my mind to. That's my point of view, but I wish you all the best, whatever way that you are deciding to deal with your story and what's going on. And to all my friends and everybody I know, big hugs. I love you all, and lots of respects, and best wishes to all the people out there. And hopefully we can all send love and loving vibes, and at least the world, whatever's happening, is becoming a cleaner place as we speak. Hari Om.